Welcome dear students of class 11th, and let us begin with the very first chapter as Foundation of Business given in NCERT, and only 7 topics you need to take over from this chapter. So first being the brief history in the form of Hundi as given in your book, then we have classification of the word business, then economic activities and its various types, then we have characteristics of business, its multiple objectives, and as we come to the risk, there is nature of risk and various causes associated with the risk. And I'm sure students, all these 7 topics can be done with the use of few acronyms or mnemonics, which will be very easier for you to learn all the points inside such topics. And directly from the NCERT, we are going to see a few punch words or keywords that you need to put as in your explain these points. So let's begin. So dear students, as we proceed in this chapter begins with a brief history specifically of business in India. So as you know students, business, with this term we can think of that any activity that keeps us busy. But to be very precise, it's not just any activity, rather only the economic activity done with the motive of earning profit can be termed as business. And if we talk about its brief history, so if there is an element of economic activity or profit earning, so there has to be some value attached to the business we are trying to deliver. It may be in the form of products or it may be in the form of goods or services. And since we talk about the value, that value acts as an exchange mechanism between a buyer and a seller. So this particularly, if we talk about Hundi students, this is a brief history as given in the book on Indian merchant communities. And when we say Hundi, we are basically referring to the bill of exchange. Hundi is nothing but a bill of exchange in modern days, that is an instrument used for exchange of goods and services. So there have been 7 types of Hundi as given in your book. This extract has directly been taken from your NCERT students so as to attempt the questions as asked, maybe of MCQ type from this segment. So first in line is Dhani Jog Hundi, or you can see students, there are 2 categories. One is Darshani Hundi and the other type is Muddati Hundi. So there are 2 types of Hundis. First of all, this you need to understand. With Darshani, we mean that it is paid on sight. Darshan means sight. तो जैसे ही देखा वैसे ही payment किया, or maybe we can call it that any bill of exchange payable on demand as soon as the receiver gets it. So in this Darshani Hundi we have 4 subtypes, while in Muddati is something for a short term or maybe after a fixed tenure. So there has to be a short span of time attached to Muddati Hundi. So in this we have 3 subtypes. Now when we talk about Darshani Hundi, there can be 4 subtypes: Dhani Jog, Sahjog, Farman Jog and Dekhan Jog. So these are the vernacular terms taken from Hindi itself. So you can relate students like Dhani Jog. Dhani means payable to any person. Whenever the Hundi is payable to any person, we call it Dhani Jog Hundi. If it is of Darshani type, it is immediately paid without any liability over whom the payment has been received. And for Dhani Jog Muddati Hundi, we can relate these to 1 and 5 are very much related because it is also payable to any person, but after a fixed term or tenure of time. So this is the basic difference between Darshani and Muddati. Second one being Sahjog. Sahjog, in this it is payable to a specific person as mentioned in the Hundi. So this is liability over who received the payment, because there has to be a person to receive this payment. And similarly in this we can relate it with next type, that is Farman Jog. Farman means, you can relate, this is an Urdu word, Farman means order. So any Hundi that is payable to a person that has been ordered to be paid. So it is payable to order. Similarly in Farman Jog Muddati Hundi, this third point can be related to the 6th type, Farman Jog, where it is also payable to an order but following a fixed span of time. Then next in line students is Dekhan Har Hundi. This is payable to presenter or bearer of the Hundi. Bearer means anybody who picks up this instrument has to be paid. So देखन जोग, जिसने देख लिया उसको पेमेंट करनी है. तो यहाँ से हमारा ये मतलब है, again it is payable on demand. And we have in another type, last one being Jokhami Hundi. Jokham, you can relate the word with risk. So it attaches an amount of risk, and when we see its explanation from NCERT, it is drawn against dispatched goods, because every bill of exchange is drawn against the dispatched goods. But what is the element of risk? Is basically the risk in transit. If the goods get lost in transit, the drawer of this bill becomes the the payer of the money, and drawee carries no liability. Means there are two parties, students, try to understand. One is the drawer of the bill who makes up the bill, and the drawee for whom this bill is made. So drawee has no liability. He is simply the, we can call it payee, and drawer is also the payer. So here all liability falls on the payer, means he only has to pay in case the goods get lost in transit. So there is an amount of risk attached to this type of hundi, and that's how the name Jokhami Hundi. But this, remember, it's always muddati. Muddati means payable after a fixed term. So this is all about the concept of hundi that was used as an instrument, and we can relate in today's world with bill of exchange for exchange of goods and services between buyer and a seller. The next important segment is classification of business, students, where business has been classified as industry and commerce. Sometimes we think that being commerce students, we are it's the bigger term as compared to business, and we think generally that businesses might be a part of commerce, but no, it's vice versa. Business is a more wider term. It comprises of two kinds of activities. One is industry and the other is commerce. When we talk about industry, students, you might have heard already that there are three types: primary, secondary and tertiary. This you would have read in economics in class 9th. This is PST, you can remember as PST. But when we say industry, we are simply meaning the manufacturing part or production and procurement part of goods and services. Although this tertiary industry also comprises of some aids to trade, as you have heard of, but with industry generally it is all about manufacturing and production and procurement of the goods. Now, in the next segment called commerce, we are mainly concerned about the exchange mechanism, that is buying and selling, or we can term it as trade. This is nothing but buying and selling, and few activities that supports this trade is called auxiliaries or aids to trade, that is also comprised in this term called commerce. So now if we talk about this industry, students, there are three types: primary, secondary and tertiary. And in primary, you can see there are further two types: extractive and genetic. Extractive means something taken out from the natural resources, like it may be the iron ores, iron from iron ores. The minerals are basically extracted from their ores. So this comes under extractive industry. Then in genetic industry, we are concerned with the living forms which carry genes. In maybe we can take up the poultry farming or fishing or pisciculture, like all these activities come under genetic type of primary industry. Similarly, next in line is secondary industry, students, where there are two subcategories: manufacturing and construction. When we talk about manufacturing, this is very important segment and questions are asked from this segment. You have to remember the four subtypes of manufacturing industries as ASAP, ASAP. You can remember it as ASAP: analytical, synthetical, assembling and processing. So next in line is construction industry, where we are mainly concerned about the construction of bridges and dams and maybe the flyovers, infrastructure. So this all comes under construction industry. Now if we talk about tertiary, students, this can well related with the auxiliaries to trade, because it has all kinds of services that are provided to these industries in terms of banking, warehousing, advertising. Then you have finance services. So all these terms are covered under tertiary sector of the economy. When we talk about trade, as I told you, students, it is nothing but buying and selling, the exchange mechanism of goods and services. So here it can be internal trade within the boundaries of the nation, and there can be an external trade that is outside the nation's boundary, or international trade. So one by one we have entire chapter on this segment, students. We'll come to it later. But as of now, you can understand that internal trade has wholesaler and retailer in between, the manufacturer and consumer. And here we have either import export or interport. Questions are asked on this interport segment, students, because it's a new term. Import, you already know that when something is bought from the outside country to our home country. Export is when our goods are exported, are sent to outside countries for sale. And interport is simply something that relates to passing of the goods from one nation to another nation through a third nation. Like suppose we are buying something from USA and then supplying it to Bangladesh. So India becomes the interport, a mediator, an agent between two countries facilitating their trade activities. So this is interport. Now, in the tertiary sector, or we can say that auxiliaries to trade, these are basically the activities that help or aids the trade activities. So here we have all kinds of activities such as transportation involved in removing the hindrance of place, then warehousing, removing the hindrance of time, because there is always a time gap between demand and supply, then insurance, removing the hindrance of risk, then banking and finance, removing the hindrance of money, or we can say capital, and advertising, that removes the hindrance of, we can say, information, or it helps or aids in communication between buyer and seller. So these are all the things you need to learn in classification of industries. Let us come back to this segment, students, a SAP, which is very, very important from manufacturing type of industries under secondary industry, where manufacturing, some kind of conversion of raw material to finished good is taking place under these four subcategories. So with analytical, we mean to analyze. Analyze means breaking down. Simply one product is broken down into several different useful products. Like we can take an example of oil refineries, where fractional distillation of petroleum leads to production of several useful products like paraffin, wax, and gasoline, Vaseline. So all these comes under analytical industry. With synthetical industry, students, we mean to synthesize or to form. This is done, formation is done with the help of several different products, leading to conversion into one single product. So one single product is formed with the help of different types of products. And the best example in this segment, students, can be cement industry, where different products are used to make varieties of materials. Then comes A for assembling industry, ASAP. So A assembling means taking the different parts, spare parts are produced at different outlets, or we can say the different factories, where they are joined at a particular place to get the entire product. The best example in this segment can be of TV, or we can talk about computers getting manufactured in this way, where all different parts, the speakers, the circuit, integrated circuit, IC, and the different parts get manufactured at different places, and finally they are combined to form a big computer. Then in processing industry, it involves necessarily a chronological set of sequence, the set of instructions to be followed to get the process done in order to manufacture the end product. And here the best example can be, student, the paper industry, or we can call sugar industry, where there are different processes followed to get sugar and in the factories. So remember these manufacturing industry as ASAP, analytical, synthetical, assembling, and processing. Now, talking about this entire flowchart, students, we have already understood that commerce is just a part of a bigger term called business, and industry and commerce, these are the two main parts of business. In industry, we are concerned mainly with the conversion of raw material into finished goods, and tertiary sector is a helping sector that aids the different activities, and can be well related to auxiliaries to trade. This entire student chapter is covered in chapter 4, business services, of your book, which will come later. And the trade can be classified as internal and external. The internal trade is chapter 10 of your book, students, and external trade is dealt in chapter 11 as international trade. So we are going to talk about all this in the chapters to come. Another important segment is the types of economic activities, students. With economic activities, we definitely mean only those activities which are done with the motive of earning profit, and they can be classified as either business, profession, or employment. Now let us talk about few basic differences between these three types of economic activities. The first one being business. When we talk about the establishment, the method of establishment, there are some legal formalities, and it's totally the entrepreneur's decision to open up the business unit. And in profession, we can say that there is a membership of a professional body, and the certificate has to be obtained from that particular professional body to open up the render these professional services. In case of employment students, there has to be an appointment letter or an agreement between the employer and the employee, which acts as the mode of establishment of employment. When we talk about the nature of work, here it is purely the distribution of goods and services for the public. Here there can be personalized services, expert services like that of a chartered accountant or a lawyer or a doctor. Here the services are given as per the rules of service and the service contract. As far as qualification is concerned, students, in business there is no set of minimum qualification required till date. However, in case of profession, there has to be some expertise, and by the professional body, the qualifications are determined, and specific training is given in the particular field to be a professional of the field. Then in case of employment, there is some set of rules again as prescribed by the employer that acts as a qualification, the minimum set of qualifications or trainings or experience. Then reward, as far as this is concerned, students, the biggest reward in the business is the profit earning, the profit that is earned by the business person. Here there is fee, professional fee, and here the simply salary or wages that are earned by the one who is employed. As far as capital investment is concerned, it is biggest in case of business students because it is all your work. The size and nature will determine the amount of investment required. Here only a limited capital is required to be introduced as when you establish the business, because it's a kind of small setup as a profession. And then here in case of employment, there is no capital requirement because all the capital investment is done by the employer and nothing on the employee side. As far as risk is concerned, students, the more the capital, the greater the risk. So since the profits are irregular, uncertain, risk element is always attached in case of business. In case of profession, it is there, but not that amount. Means as compared to the business, it carries a little amount of risk. And here almost there is no risk because fixed and regular payments come in the form of salary and wages. The code of conduct here is not prescribed at all. Here it is given by the professional body, and in case of employment, it is laid down by the employer. Then this is the example. We can talk about these three economic activities. Here there can be some shop or the factory owned by the business person. Here there are various professions, the legal profession, the medical profession, the chartered accountancy profession, and this side we have a set of employment generating industries or sectors like in the form of banks, insurance companies, the government departments, and many other private players as well. So I hope the difference between the three activities of economy like business, profession and employment is very clear to you. Thank you.